Well, thank you so much for staying with Daybreak. We're just starting that discussion, and I asked you earlier on to tweet in at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. We're wondering what the problem is. We've seen that the teenage pregnancy crisis is increasing. We've seen teenagers being found in house parties. So what is the problem really here? Is it a lack of parental guidance? Is it social media influence? What is going on? None of us have the answers. We'd just like to hear from you as well. At Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Daybreak. My guests are joining me here. Dr. Stephen KALITI, who's a gynecologist and also the head division of reproductive and maternal health at the Ministry of Health, is joining us on phone because he's way out in Kwale. Dr. MISATI, who's a public health specialist, is joining us online. WAHU KAGWI is a recording artist who is with me here in studio, and IBAGAIL MBURU, who's a student and also a teenager, will be joining us as well right here in studio. And I'll start with Dr. KALITI. Thank you so much for making time for us, Dr. So there have been reports that teenage pregnancies have significantly increased during COVID-19 lockdown. Is it true by the statistics that you have, and by how much?
Trevor, thank you for that. It's been a debate, and I think the Minister of Health in various forums has responded to that. It is true there is a perceived increase of teenage pregnancies over this time, but we do have a system of collecting data across the country, and we use the Kenya Health Information System, where we capture each and every pregnancy as a report to our facilities across the country. And we said a little bit earlier that the data coming from KHIS does not support this per se. And just have to say that, Trevor, teenage pregnancy rates in the country have been falling over the last decade. Around 20 years ago, we are at 160 births per 1,000 live births by teenagers, and now we are speaking something close to 80 in 1,000 births in our facilities and in the public. That has been falling over time. There might be a slight bump during this time of COVID-19 because of the issues that we are talking about for COVID restrictions and, of course, the elimination of safety nets for children and especially schooling. But the data on the ground from the ministry side has not really been showing that kind of spike that we are noticing. And in fact, it is the reason we are on the ground now, because one of the things we are doing the data verification for teenage pregnancies, and we are trying to reconcile to see where the difference from what, Trevor, you are saying, and what we have in the system, where the disconnect is. And I hope within the next, maybe the end of the week or by next week, we should have reconciled the same and given you a firm answer whether we are on the right or not.
All right, Dr. KALITI, now that you're on the ground there, what are some of the measures then that the ministry is putting in place to reduce it completely or even eradicate teenage pregnancy? Because even though the numbers are not rising, there must be some measures you're putting in place to make sure that it doesn't go higher.
Definitely. Let me say that one teenage pregnancy is one too many. So we don't have to wait for the numbers to rise for us to take action. And I love the question you have raised, because teenage pregnancy usually has an adverse effect on the teenagers, and most of the time can even curtail the life course of that person because of course, disadvantage in various forms, and they are not able to achieve their full potential for one reason or another. That said, we have had measures that are ongoing, and we have even revamped them during the time of COVID-19. And among them is like, as a ministry, it's our duty to give appropriate policies to the country on what needs to be done. And I can tell you that the Minister of Health is definitely leading a multi-sectory teenage prevention, strategy for the country, which has multiple players, and everybody will be able to plug in on their piece. And that is the role of the ministry, to give the strategic guidance together with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Gender and all the other ministries that are involved. That said, there are some specific things that the ministry can do, and one of them, of course, is passing the message across and, loud, that Kenya, we need to focus on delayed sexual debut. Sexual debut is basically the first act that occurs among teenagers when it comes to, sexual matters. For the simple reason that once that is initiated, it triggers a ripple effect and sort of a downturn of effect on the teenager, and the risk of repeating the same is usually high. So the most appropriate would be to make sure we delay that to the appropriate time when these teenagers have grown that stage and they are responsible enough to be able to engage. However, there are those for one reason or another may end up engaging, and we are just about to talk about sex and gender-based violence, which has also sort of spiked during the time of COVID-19. We do have measures of rehabilitating them, and being able to bring them back again to the mainstream. And we focus a lot on getting them either back to school again and having youth-friendly services where they can access the services where they need, and also being cancelled and strengthened. We do also have other programs that are running for sort of empowering the girls. And one of the key things that we are doing in the Ministry of Health as a strategy is to make sure that we have sanitary hygiene, because those are some of the things that are disempowering girls and making them depend on handouts and seek favors from people who may be more privileged. And those are things that we are doing. We are also hoping to develop, and we're in the process of developing a national literacy platform on sexual reproductive health. And this has been led by Minister of Health and the Minister of Education. And I can say maybe a week ago, we had a meeting with the Council for Curriculum Development, and this is in top gear so that we can develop sexuality education that is culturally sensitive and is appropriate, because you need to know these are growing minds, and the level at which you expose them to whichever content has an impact, and sometimes maybe lifelong. And everybody has a role to play. And we have seen a lot of media bleeds on sort of glorify some of the actions that are not so, that are not so in quotes, that are not so holy. And those are things that we need to speak ourselves as a nation and see what is it that we need to bequeath our generation that is upcoming and guide them appropriately.
All right, stay with me, Dr. Kaliti. Let me bring in Dr. Rose on this. And Dr. Rose, Dr. Kaliti is bringing in a very interesting aspect of focusing on delaying sexual debut. How do we achieve that in the era of social media and peer pressure and all these things that are going on right now?
Thank you so much, Trevor. And Dr. Kaliti, that was fantastic. It's very well articulated. I would like to say that information is power. So it's important, even from the household level, that we have these teenagers equipped with information so that then they can be able to make informed choices. Yes, the exposure but to the social media is real, and there's a lot of information out there. However, it's critical for the parents. I always say that parents are the primary sex educators of their children. So once parents have been able to pass information to the children that is factual, that is according to their beliefs, when the children go out there and they are exposed to all this information, they are able to make a decision, they are able to make a choice. Leaving this responsibility to the school, to the church, and to the society is actually like what I call that is suicide, because most of the time, by the time the children are getting this information, you find that it's too late if they haven't had it from home. Sometimes you have parents waiting for the right time to pass the information to their children, and unfortunately we have what we call precocious puberty. We have children getting to puberty too early. We have them being exposed to information through the social media, and that becomes a challenge. And talking about parents being the leaders in the families, I would like to say that parents need to have control of the information that the children are exposed to. That means that if the children have phones, parents have a right to access the phone and know who the child is interacting with. But when the child is left on their own, their young minds are highly impressionable, and it's easy to have the child being misled. But again, now when we talk about the parent being the leader, is the parent equipped? That is the question. Because if the parent is not equipped, then most likely we don't expect them to equip the children, or rather to give them what they do not have. So we have parents also to be equipped with emerging trends, and also whatever misinformation that they learned when they were young, we need to have them unlearn and relearn, because we end up passing to our children that which was passed to us. And many times, because we come from cultures that shamed, especially the female body was shamed. So you find that parents are painfully silent. And because of the stigma that is associated, parents expect other people to talk to their children matters sexuality, which may have worked earlier on, maybe in my generation and older, whereby perhaps our parents would not speak to us because of the kind of shame or cultural taboo and myths. But then we had the uncles and the aunties and the grandparents. But now, because of the life we live, the grandparents and the uncles and the aunties are either emotionally or physically unavailable. So where is this child left? The child is left to get information from social media. Unfortunately, that is misleading many times. And so they end up, making choices that are out of the information they get that is misleading, because they have failed to get wholesome information right from the home. Thank you.
A very interesting perspective there, because I want to bring in WAHU on this. WAHU, you are a parent of a teenager.
I am.
And at what point do you even speak to her? What do you tell her?
So first of all, my daughter is just 14, so
Yeah.
we have just entered the teenage journey, and I'm listening to the conversation, also learning, because I'm by no means an expert. We are just 2 years.
There's no guidebook to parenting.
two years into teenage. So I also look for a lot of information for it. But for me, one thing I say is it's so important to be hands-on as a parent from when the child is young, because if you want to be close with your daughter in her teenage, or your son in their teenage, it's something that you have to start when they're young. You won't wake up when they're 13 and all of a sudden say, hey, what's up? Can we be pals? Like, where were you when I was 7, you know? So I genuinely think that that is important, to invest in that relationship when they're young. For us, we started having conversations when my firstborn was probably about 8 or 9, is when she started asking me, where do babies really come from? You know, when I was, how do they, like, let's genuinely talk. Babies don't come just from heaven, you know.
Or the supermarket.
They do come from heaven, but how, you know? So one of the things the guidance says that I remember getting is really being honest about where do babies, of course, breaking it down in a way that the child can understand, you know, using it in that way, but not lying to the child about where babies come from. And I think once the child is ready to have the conversation, you should not shy away from it. Myself as well, you know, it was a difficult conversation when I was young to have with our parents. It was like very secretive and very, you know, but I think it's so important, as has been said, to have those conversations, because if we are not present, there is no lack of information, and unfortunately, most of it is false, misleading, is not the right thing that you want your children to be exposed to. So yeah, when the child presents the situation, be ready to give the truth about it.
At that point. Let me bring in Abigail on this. And Abigail, you're a student as well and a teenager. Where are we missing the point here? We've seen some of your peers, not necessarily you, being caught up in house parties and all that.
Yes.
Where is the disconnect? Is it the lack of parental guidance? Is it peer pressure? What is going on?
Okay, it's a lot of things going on, because there's peer pressure. You see your friends doing or acting in a certain way, and you also want to do the same so that you can feel loved, you can feel recognized, and people can like you. There is also now them feeling like their parents are so boring that they have to get out of the house and then end up doing things that really just mess them up in the future. Yeah.
So now the idea here is to be liked by your peers. And how do you get that information? Where do you get that information from?
It's not really someone telling you that you need to be liked. It's like an instinct. Like you feel like at home you're not being recognized. Maybe your parents are too busy and not giving you enough time, or not focusing on you enough. Maybe you have a lot of siblings and they're busy at work. So it's now you wanting to feel, you know, have validation, receive validation from someone. And now that you can't receive it from your parents, you go looking for now like your teenagers and like friends so that you can receive it from them. So you end up doing things just to get validation so that people can like you.
In this day and age, where do you get information that you think is quality information? For example, if you're going to talk about the risks that you face when you're out there, do you discuss this with your peers, or do you discuss this with your parents? Is it your aunties? Who do you speak to?
I speak with my parents. We talk a lot. With my sister, she's a year older than me. I also speak with my peers, like some of my friends, and I'm in a mentorship program called ACAD. So we discuss this type of things on that group. So that to normalize the discussion, because it's usually shied away from, and you're just expected to know what to do when it comes to certain situations, and expected to know how to react to certain things.
And this is, you're not told, and that's where the problem is, because they are expected to react in a certain way, but nobody has told them how to react.
Exactly.
Yes.
So then, at what point, what is the right time then? Because many people are wondering, if you're going to talk to your parents about issues to do with sexuality, what then is the right time?
I think for the conversation to be normalized, I think it's something you have to have a relationship with your child. And again, I'm also not speaking as an expert. You know, my daughter keeps telling me, Mom, it's okay if you mess up. Like the first time she told me that she was 10 years old, she's like, Mom, you've only been a parent for 10 years. So it's okay. You don't have all the answers. It's like, how old are you again? So for me, I think having a relationship with your kids is so important. And not just having a relationship, being able to have open conversations and making them go zones. Like, I'm not going to judge you if you're in a predicament, if you've been in a certain situation that you are unsure about, you feel like this may not be the right thing to do. I should, as the parent, make this a go conversation. And I love you regardless kind of situation. You don't have to, because if you do come down on that child, say for example, if the child comes and says, hey, I have a crush on so-and-so, and then you frown and then you look and you say almost disapproving, that child will never come back and tell you anything about their relationship. And that's the end. They will go and seek their guidance elsewhere. You know, and so it's so important to engage, normalize, like the young lady has said, normalize these conversations and just talk. But also, as one of the experts has mentioned, as parents, it's upon us to get the information. You know, get the guidance, do your research, understand what does parenting this age look like, and you know, read the books, read the research, understand the struggles of this age, so that you can, and this generation, so that we can be able to engage with your child. Let
me bring in Dr. Kaliti back on this. And Dr. Kaliti, you know, the ministry is advocating for abstinence. Should the messaging around that change, considering that statistics now show that children as young as 9 or even 10 are engaging in sexual activity? And you spoke about delaying the sexual debut.
Now, Trevor, that's a very interesting question. And look at it like this. Just because you have a spike in crime does not mean that you abolish the police force and you abolish the Constitution or the laws. Let's get it right. That although we may have some, you call them experimentation within this age group, service to say that the age of sexual debut in Kenya in 2014 was 20 years. That is the average. That's when most of the teenagers and your Kenyans initiate coital activity or sexual activity. And as we do the KDHS this coming year, we expect that to be somewhere upwards of 21 to 22. So Trevor, it is good to know that the majority, we still have, we do have a base that is guiding on what we need to do. There are few who may fall through the cracks, and unfortunately, as I said, it's not a one-man show. Everyone has a role to play. It is up to us to be able to close those loopholes instead of normalizing. When you tell me that we should sort of normalize that, and that is a narrative that needs to change, that just because someone has fallen does not mean that we need to keep the teenagers and the society and the kids down there. Because we do have a very robust laws, and the president has made very, very clear commitments as late as last year during one of the major conferences that we had in Nairobi. And one of the things that you have said is making sure that we eliminate these harmful practices. And, things like child marriages, child abuse and sexual abuse, those are some of the things that I think do not belong to a civilized society. And we need to focus and be able to work towards eliminating that and tell the generation that the other side is normal, so that we stop glorifying and normalizing some of the acts that I think a couple of years ago people would have frowned upon. And this is why it calls as a nation to do a soul search and say, for example, if a 9-year-old is engaging in sexual activity, it raises very fundamental questions. Number one, is it between peer to peer? Are they the same peers who are doing the same? These are basically these are kids who are lucky a part of your guidance on what is to be done and being told. Because when you're growing up as a child, one of the things that you go through is brain maturity that will also give you social competency. And we do have science and research that confirm that when you are born, Trevor, you're born with what is called Olympic mind. Olympic brain or Olympic mind is the one that tells you that I want it now and I want it here. You get me? That's why as a kid, you can poop anywhere, and you really don't care about anyone else. And when you need food, you need it now and then.
Yeah.
That's the brain that is in operation. But as you grow up, you pick up a lot of competencies along the way. And these competencies are picked dependent on your environment and who is supporting you. And also parenting and the society comes in at the morals that I play, usually come in. And the social competency center is not fully developed until the age of 21, 22. And that's why we usually talk about the age of majority, when a teenager can make independent decisions free of the parents and free of the society, because by that time the social competence center will tell you this is not right and this is good, because you have gathered that in your basket as you grow along the way. Now, if a kid is involved in those activities, for example, at the age of 9, then we need to look back. It's a mirror to the society. We need to see where the rain started beating us and sort of correct that instead of normalizing that, Trevor. And I say that very passionately as a parent of teenagers myself. And I do know the things that we are talking about, it is more of sort of guidance and giving people the correct moral compass to be able to follow so that we do not lose a generation. But if every day the parent is not there, and there's no guidance, and of course this was exposed by COVID-19 when the school environment, which is also protective in itself, was sort of taken away. So it laid bare our parenting skills as a nation. And one of the things that the discussions we have here at a national level, if we need to have actually sort of a guided parental children or teenage engagement, that can be an objective way, that Trevor, we may need to hold you to account to be able to talk with your son, talk with your daughter, and make sure that you discuss these things so that we do not have to talk about some of the things that we are talking about here. And of course, the social media has a lot to play. If we keep on glorifying, again, I repeat, if we keep on glorify the abnormalities, then the society and the kids tend to pick it as the normal, because it's a blank slate and they're following basically what they are seeing. So it's up to us as a nation to be able to guide these young minds and shape them in the correct way.
And Dr. Kaliti, that's an interesting point that you bring up. In fact, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you. In this era of social media, then how do you balance? Because there's a freedom and of access to information. They have their phones. The parents may not be there throughout. What is the long-lasting solution to this?
Number one, Trevor, social media can also be addictive. The same way we have come very firm on things like, smoking and, cigarettes are not good for, for your health, the same way we say that drinking is not for underage. It is the same scenario that we are getting with social media, especially with inappropriate content. And I hope, and we are involving the relevant stakeholders to be able to see if, to the extent that is feasible, we'll be able to guide this. And that's why I'm very passionate about a literacy platform. What would the national literacy platform, help? Trevor, we do have Google in our means, and what we need with Google is that when that teenager try to search, lead words like sex, to lead them to a photo that will be able to give them the correct information. We don't leave it like the open world of web, and we do have measures that can be put and can be instilled. But most important, it boils down to parenting. When you give your child those gadgets, who is behind the screen? You cannot tell that, because we have seen, and research has shown that if you are able to moderate that interface between the gadget you are giving your child and what they are accessing, then it has a lot of influence. Because, as I said, if a child is being fed on, on fiction that is coming from the internet and all those kind of stuff, then the child grows knowing only that way and no other way. We need to tell them there's an alternative way that is better, and nobody else is going to tell them except us as parents and the society. We need to fill that gap very quickly before we lose an entire generation. And the only way is to be able to work with them, empower them, give them the facts of the year, and let them be able to decipher what this appears to be the cool thing in the street may not be so cool, and nobody else can do that. Because God created children in a very interesting way, that the parent has a pillar, a place that nobody else can touch, and they hold your word as law until, of course, a little bit of transition starts to occur at the time of teenagehood. And during that time, it is what you instill in the child that will carry them through those stormy, that stormy period of transition. And that is what we need to do by building competency and make sure that the public knows that it is normal for teenagers to go through this crisis in the form of development. And it's up to you to step in and make sure that you create a safe zone for them to transition. And I tell you a good example, Trevor. If you have a child in a room and there is a fire, just think of a toddler, and there's a naked fire over there. Would you rather tell the child, don't touch the fire? No. The solution is to get the fire away. And getting the FIRE is basically creating safety zones that these teenagers can safely experiment and transition to the next phase. By the time they get to 21, 22 years, 19, 20, 22 years, most of them sort of, come about because the social competency center is fully developed and they're able to grasp what is the implication of what they're doing. But before that, we have a huge role to make sure that we build the safety zones for these teenagers to transition safely without injuries. And we are seeing that because you're a product of that, I'm a product of that, it can happen. And we do have social networks that have broken down over time in the name of civilization in quotes. So we need to reinvent the wheel and put those systems back in place to be able to offer, a zone for this to be able to transition safely. Trevor.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Kaliti. Let me bring in Dr. Rose back on this. And Dr. Rose, we've seen a lot of students now, teenagers, being caught up in house parties. What is the best way of dealing with such a situation? Because it's one thing to expose it, because that also has a ripple effect. If it is exposed too much, even in the media here, it ends up happening even more frequently. But also Dr. Kaliti is talking about the social networks breakdown. How then do you handle such a situation without necessarily catalyzing it to become even more frequent?
Thank you so much. And I want to begin from what Abigail said. Abigail talked about the issue of wanting to fitting in with your peers, and because probably at home nobody is acknowledging you. We are created as social beings to ultimately connect with our fellow human beings. And nature abhors a vacuum. So when you have a child who is growing and they are not emotionally connected with their parents, I'm saying parents because from 0 to 12 years, the primary determinant of a child's self-esteem is the parent. So, and as WAHU said, the connection needs to begin very early so that the child can know that the parent has their back, that the parent is a trusted source of information, the parent is a trusted source of love and connection. So once the child is connected, they will actually check with the parent whatever decision that they make. But when we have children who are not emotionally connected, and because I said that nature abhors a vacuum, so whatever is empty will be filled with something or with someone. So the children go out to seek for validation. They go to seek for outside validation, and that's how they go connecting with their peers and sometimes with the wrong people. So we find them in parties, okay? So yes, I have seen children are arrested and they're taken somewhere. But I want us to acknowledge the fact that by the time a child is getting there, there is a breakdown and there is a need, there is an unmet emotional need. So the child needs to be taken through a process of acknowledging that, yes, I have these needs. Yes, as adolescents, as teenagers, there are the sexual desires that come. And sometimes the sexual desires are so strong so that if they are not guided, they will actually seek sexual gratification. So the children should be taken through a process of skills training, life skills. If you have this time in your hands, what do you do with this time? Are there activities that parents have put so that the children get occupied? And I'm saying parents because children depend on adults for guidance, for leadership, for authority, and even for provision. So a child should not be looking to provide for their own maybe sanitary needs or even, what can they do? So the parents need to be involved every step of the way. So of importance, emotional connection and skills training. And allow me to mention something about, Abigail mentioned it, being liked. This affects children, individuals, but particularly the girl child. Because the girl child has been raised in a patriarchal society whereby it is like, I need to be liked. And I always challenge girls when I'm taking them through skills training. You are not an object to be liked. You are not a dish to be liked. You're not ice cream. You're not dessert. You are also a subject who can like. These people who don't like you, what if you also decide I don't like them? So you are not there to be liked, and girls are taught to be nice. So even when you have somebody who is sexually assaulting you, abusing you, you're told, but you need to be kind, you need to be nice to them. And so at the end of the day, we keep on seeking this validation, this being liked, and this niceness. And this leads to getting with the wrong peers just because I need to get by and I need to fit in. Thank you.
I have to take a quick break here, WAHU, but I see and I would like to hear your views as well as Abigail. Ben on Twitter here. Keep your views coming and use the hashtag DAYBREAK at Citizen TV Kenya, Trevor Mbija. That's our Twitter handles. Ben on Twitter is saying, parents of these days handle kids like eggs. What do you expect? Are you soft, WAHU?
What? I think
'Cause back in our day, it was the iron fist.
I think if my daughter was here, she'd be like, I definitely, I would not regard myself as soft. I don't think all my solutions go to the stick or to chopper, but I do chopper. Of course, now when my daughter is a teenager, we converse a lot more.
Yeah.
Although there are some things that trigger me when I see on social media all these teenagers misbehaving. I look at my child, I say, Jaribu.
Try me on this one.
Try me. Go there. Try me. You will see me in this color, red. You know. But can I just say something?
Yeah.
I think it is so important, and what Abigail said, especially, I'll say that thing of being liked, right? It's a normal human need to feel like I fit in, and it never goes away, you know? It's now to understand, where do I draw the line between your opinion of me and my opinion of me, and to strengthen my opinion of myself in your child, you know, because I'll see it with my 7-year-old, like, do they like me, do I fit in? And for me, my role is to keep telling her, what do you think, how do you feel? It's not even about making me proud as a parent. Are you proud of yourself? Are you happy with yourself? But the other thing I also want to emphasize is the parental, you see, and I could be wrong, but my experience as growing up was that the role of my father, my mother was almost a given.
Yeah.
Mom got me, mom, but my dad, I needed, as a girl, I needed my dad's validation big time. And I look back now and I know that that was so important. And my dad validated me a lot. My dad really made me feel like a princess from when I was very young. He was so proud of me. He showed up for all my sports things. And now as an adult, I realized how much of a sacrifice that was, because he had to hip a job or get out of work to come for my random presentation or whatever, but it was important to me, so he made it important to him. He always told me, when I liked a boy, it became to a point where if I liked a boy, I could tell my dad. And my dad did not judge me. He'd say, oh, bring the young man home, let me meet him. And so boys were demystified for me. It was never a big deal for me. A boy likes me, so what? Because I had validation from the primary male in my life. And so whenever I can, I tell fathers, guys, your role is not just to provide. Yeah? Your role is being there, validate that child. Strengthen that boy. Tell that girl she's a princess, she's gorgeous. So that when a boy, because she wants it, she needs it. But when she gets it from her dad, who's safer than her dad? You get? And in the situation where you're a single mom and all that, you look for a positive male figure who can step in and play that validation role, because of course that's our reality today. There's a lot of single parenting. Look for a positive, look for your brother, look for a cousin, look for somebody who can step in and validate that girl. So that when she gets to teenage, it's such a,
it's a normal thing.
I remember when I was a teenager, a boy touching me, and I was disgusted. I'm like, how dare you? Because it was not a thing. I did not need that kind of liking from him. I'm like, dude, can we do homework if we're doing homework? You know, and that's what you want, a situation where when your girl is in secret with somebody, she makes the right decision.
They have self-control.
Exactly.
Let me bring in Abigail on this. And Abigail, this is rather subjective. It's more of your opinion, really. And it's related to what Ben is saying here on Twitter. He says parents of these days handle kids like eggs. What do you expect? Would you prefer the iron fist? And what do your peers tell you? Is it better if there were rules? Because back in the day, for us, even having a phone was not an option. And you would be beaten. Is that a better option?
Okay, for me, well, this generation, when you beat someone, it doesn't really like help so much. Like for kids, it works sometimes, but as you grow up and you're a teenager, if your parent beats you, you're like, okay, wow, seriously, you know, I'm mature enough to understand what you have to just talk. You don't have to beat me, because now you beat me, I get pissed. I'm going to now do something rebellious, now prove a point to you that no matter how much you beat me, I'm still going to react and I'm still going to be the way I am, just because you think that you have control over me because you've beaten me up.
So do you feel like there's a disconnect between our generations and yours? Are we speaking the same language? What would you like us to say to you so that you understand that we somehow have your best interest at heart? How would you like that information packaged?
Okay, so it's hard for like people of your generation to connect with
I'm
ours.
really that old, WAHU, but sorry.
Sorry. Yeah,
No,
sorry.
it's okay.
To connect with ours.
I'm kidding. It's all right.
To connect with ours, because we were raised differently. Like the way you were raised is different from the way we are raised, and like everything has changed. So the approaches that your parents took to raise you up shouldn't be exactly the same that you take to raise your children up, because you know things are different and you have to approach things differently.
Yeah. So let's talk about phones, for example. Would you rather your mom checked your phone every other time, or would you volunteer to give her your phone? What do you prefer?
Okay, phone checking. I had a problem with that. When I first got my phone, like the first years, my mom used to just take my phone and she looks at it, and I'd get so pissed. Not because I'm hiding anything. I was 12. There's nothing I have on my phone that's so bad. But I used to be like, wow, what do you think I'm doing on my phone? I literally just used to play games, talk to my 3 friends. Like, I just,
But if you're
in
not
my
doing
own
anything,
world.
then why is it a problem?
Then I'm just there like, but why are you checking my phone? You know, like everyone else just has their own phone. Like my friends would have their own phones. So no one is checking their phone. So I'm just there like, okay, wow, my parents are always on my neck, just checking my phones, just doing this, just doing that. And I'd get really pissed off. Like, you don't trust me. Like, you don't think I can do the right thing at this age. Like, seriously, you know? Yeah, that's how I used to feel.
But would you have that conversation with them and tell them that I don't want you checking my phone?
Yeah. I told them that.
No, now that comes in the difference. Our time would be beaten up. Who bought you the phone anyway? But still, but what I find very interesting is, if you feel that there's nothing you're hiding, then why is it a problem?
Okay, checking phones hasn't been normalized. Like, when your parents check your phone, it's like they're suspicious that you're doing something. And maybe, for me, my friends never used to have their parents check their phones. So I was like now the only one who has to submit their phone all the time. Like every Friday, I have to hand in my phone so they can look at it and see what I'm doing. And then my friends are just there like, what? Your parents are treating you like a baby. That's so, you know, wow. Like,
But
you know.
do you realize that sometimes your friends don't tell you things that they think you want to hear, but it's not necessarily what's going on? Because they might be going through the same thing. Their parents are checking their phones, but because there's this perception that their phones are not supposed to be checked, they lie to you and tell you that why are you being controlled so much, and yet they are also being controlled.
There's that, but for me, I usually feel like they cannot lie. Okay, they can lie, but they can't lie about some things, because now, like, why are you lying? That's not an honest relationship.
So you really trust your friends that much?
Once I trust someone, I put trust, like even in my parents, like I trust everyone a lot. Okay. Yes.
And now that is another thing we're going to talk about, trusting people. And in terms of SGBV and WAHU, you had a very interesting conversation on your Instagram. I saw it sometimes back. We'd like to talk about that so that we know at what point then does an interaction end up being almost SGBV. Because some people say this is subjective, maybe it's not. There has to be a clear definition of what it is. At what point does now, if consent is withdrawn, at what point does it change into SGBV? And she's also spoken about trust. You may be hanging out with some of your friends, some of them may be boys, but because you trust each other so much, you may let some things go, and yet they're not supposed to go. Yeah. We'd also bring in Dr. Kaliti on this to explain what SGBV is, but we'd like to hear from you as well after the break. I see a lot of feedback coming through at Citizen TV Kenya, Trevor Mbija. Use the hashtag DAYBREAK. We're talking about the teenage crisis. I see a lot of it. I'll read some of your feedback when we come back, all right? Stay with DAYBREAK.